Channel 628.
Clear your diaries for the 25th of March, 2026. Channel Africa, in partnership with Wits Business School, invites you to a climate change conversation that goes beyond talk. 3 powerful panel discussions. 1 stage. Big questions, bold answers. If you care about the future and value honest, intelligent discussions, this is your seat at the table. Join us on March 25 for Africa Matters. Climate change. Financing Africa's recovery. Only on Channel Africa.
Are you fluent in French, Chinyanja, Portuguese, and Kiswahili? Are you passionate about radio? And are you looking to work in South Africa? Do you have papers that qualify you to work in South Africa? In that case, we might have an opportunity for you to work for Channel Africa. Send us your CV and demo at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Remember, if you don't hear from us within 14 days, it means you have not made it or you have not been selected. Channel Africa. SABC News. The African Perspective.
Looking at your top stories this hour, Tunisian court sentences prominent migrant rights activists to 8 years in prison, and heavy explosions reported across Tehran. Your latest news, greetings to our listeners. A Tunisian court has sentenced Saadia Mosba, a prominent migrant rights and anti-racist activist, to 8 years in prison in a ruling that highlights what critics describe as an escalating crackdown on civil society and independent voices. Mosba has been detained since May 2024 alongside several other activists detained in a government crackdown on groups aiding migrants. Mosba faced charges of money laundering and illicit enrichment. The Eastern Cape Province House of Traditional and Khoisan leaders in South Africa has called on the government to take immediate action on reports of a Nigerian national being coronated at Kugombo City last weekend. The Provincial Traditional Authority has condemned this development and believes it undermines the rule of law. Next week, a march will be held in condemnation of the alleged coronation. The Deputy Chairperson of the House, Nkosi Kwazinamba Matanzima, explains.
They broke the law, and if you care to know, you only become a traditional leader only if your royal family recognize you and even the community of South Africa. Now we are talking about foreigners. No one knows what informs them that they can make their kingship in South Africa.
South Africa's Deputy Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Dr. Dixon Masemola, has raised concern about the failure of political parties to manage multi-party coalitions. Masemola says the emergence of coalitions has not produced cohesive or impactful leadership. He says South Africa has experienced an upsurge in crime, lawlessness and crime syndicates. Masemola was tabling his department's overview during COGTA's ministerial engagement session with metropolitan mayors in Boksburg in the east of Johannesburg.
The difficulties of managing the multi-party coalitions, which necessitated at this point in time a development of a coalitions law or a bill which is underway. But the point remains that this feature and how South Africans, those who are elected, are supposed to live up to what their supreme law of the Republic dictates to them. They seem to negate that fundamental value and do things contrary to what the Constitution says.
2 brothers who are medical professors have been commended for their work by South African Health Minister Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi. Professor Mashudu Chifularo, who performed the world's first middle ear transplant in 2024 at the Steve Biko Academic Hospital, his brother Dr. Nyaweleni Chifularo led a team of multidisciplinary health professionals in separating conjoined twins on Tuesday at the Magweng Hospital outside Polokwane in the Limpopo province. Motsoaledi appreciated the brothers for remaining in public hospitals.
Wanted to thank the Chifularo family because many of you might not know Professor Chifularo here who did this groundbreaking operation. His brother is a professor of ENT at Steve Biko. He also did the groundbreaking operation. He is the first person in the world who did that middle ear transplant at Steve Biko Academic Hospital, planting the small ear bones we call ossicles using titanium and 3D technology. That was never done in the world. So it's a blazing family. We want to thank them, and we thank them for staying in a public hospital.
Lastly, heavy explosions have been reported across Tehran as the Israeli military continues to bombard the Iranian capital. Iranian media says the Revolutionary Guard spokesperson Ali Mohammad Naina has been killed but didn't specify when and where. Despite the continued bombardment, Iran insists it's continuing to produce missiles. The BBC's Lise Deshay says that despite the blows, the Iranian military is still capable of an intense response.
Even though there has been the assassination of top security officials and commanders, and yes, its conventional military has been all but destroyed, it still has the ability to wage what we have constantly referred to as this asymmetric war. It still has very crude, very cheap to produce munitions. It has the strategies. It's prepared a very long time for a war like this.
Recapping on your top stories, a Tunisian court has sentenced Saidia Mosba, a prominent migrant rights and anti-racist activist, to 8 years in prison in a ruling that highlights what critics describe as an escalating crackdown on civil society and independent voices. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntsintsi.
SABC News. The African perspective.
And coming up in your sports news, the Sawa live in South Africa, the driving force behind the Southern Guards revamp, while the Asian Football Confederation announces the discontinuation of the bidding process for the AFC Asian Cup in 2031 and 2035. I'll tell you more at 4:30.
Business, trade, and investment opportunities that put the continent first. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni.
It is a very good afternoon to you, Zambia. Good afternoon, Zimbabwe, Kenya, Eswatini. Good afternoon to you, Côte d'Ivoire. Good afternoon, Africa. Welcome to Africa in Business on Channel Africa. I'm Thami Ngubeni. This is the Friday edition. Welcome to it. Here's what we've got coming up for you this hour. The fertilizer prices surge amid escalating tensions in the Middle East. And Africa's markets navigate a period of heightened uncertainty as global economics shifts and geopolitical tensions continue to shape the continent's outlook. Do stay connected to Africa and the world with Channel Africa, the international voice of the South African Broadcasting Corporation. Watch or listen anytime, anywhere at channelafrica.co.za. on the Channel Africa mobile app and on SABC Plus or via the DSTV and OpenView audio bouquets. You can also catch us on social media at Channel Africa on Facebook and Channel Africa One on all other platforms. Channel Africa, first with the African story globally.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It is exactly 8 minutes after 4 p.m. We begin here this afternoon. The European Commission has called for de-escalation in the Middle East war amid energy security concerns and rising geopolitical tensions. At a summit in Brussels, leaders addressed easing regional conflicts and securing shipping lanes through the Strait of Hormuz, among other topics. Key figures, including German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and French President Emmanuel Macron, reiterated Europe's call for all parties to halt hostilities and pave the way for renewed negotiations. Bonolo Maribe compiled this report.
As the world enters the third week of the US-Israel war against Iran, calls for de-escalation are intensifying. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen warned that the crisis poses severe risks far beyond the region.
The situation in the region is extremely serious, It is causing great instability, suffering, and growing risks far beyond the region itself. And this is why we need de-escalation and maximum restraint, the protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure. And I want to say a word about our partners and friends in the Gulf and the broader region. We stand with them in solidarity and in friendship. The European Union is supporting them. And just this week, the Commission announced over 450 million euros in humanitarian assistance for the region.
The closure of the Strait of Hormuz has left Europe's import-dependent energy sector exposed to severe price volatility. European Council President Antonio Costa stressed the need to rely on domestic energy sources.
The
current Middle East crisis and the impact it has on our energy supply confirms that we have chosen the right path, which is what we need to become more autonomous and rely on our own energy sources. Decarbonization and using local energy sources is still the right thing to do to limit dangerous dependency and to reduce the cost of energy in the long term. But at the same time, we need to take immediate actions to protect our citizens and enterprises.
French President Emmanuel Macron echoed the call for restraint.
I reiterated France's position in this conflict. It is strictly defensive. It aims to protect our nationals and our interests, to support our regional allies, to preserve freedom of navigation and maritime security, and to do everything possible to help de-escalate.
While German Chancellor Friedrich Merz urged an immediate end to hostilities.
The global repercussions extending as far as the United States of America are serious. That is why we all want an end to the hostilities as soon as possible. What we need now is to embark on a new peace order for the Middle East. A central element of this must be the security of the State of Israel, but equally the security of the Gulf states.
Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu insists his country remains committed to destroying Iran's ballistic missiles and nuclear programs. But Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan criticized Israel as the war's primary aggressor, accusing it of sabotaging US-Iran nuclear negotiations. Bonolo Maribe, SBC News.
Your life, your rhythm, your Africa. Channel Africa. Find it for free on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
It is exactly 12 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. For our weekly business roundup, we joined this afternoon by Victor Kgomuswana. He's author of Africa is Open for Business and Africa Bounces Back. He's also the Executive Director for Marketing and Communication at the University of Limpopo. So good to be talking to you once again, Victor. Happy Friday to you.
Happy Friday, the best time of the week, best time of the day.
Do you think? Well, look, a number of stories that we'll be looking at today, including some on Nigeria, Mozambique, Botswana. But let's start with Nigeria. Their current account surplus has now narrowed, and this is really largely due to Dangote refinery.
Exactly. Thami, every time I threw a story, Dangote story, I told you, he is so big that you can't not talk about him if anything happens. If he even sneezes in a funny way, we have to find out if he's not well. The refinery, as you know, is a 650,000 barrels per day refinery. It has managed to export crude refined products worth about 5.85 already refined crude oil product. This is petrol now, $5.85 billion. But the reason is this is an issue. It disturbed the balance of payments. It disturbed the budget deficit because they used to be exporting a lot of crude oil. Now, for a change, they imported crude oil because Dangote's refinery cannot find enough crude in Nigeria. Part of it was just bureaucracy that was making it impossible for him to access the crude. But as a result, the crude exports went down 14.4%, and yet they increased they went to up to $6.4 billion. That in 2023 they went up. So the imbalance is created by that, because what they used to export, which is crude, is now being processed locally, and what used to be exported as little amounts in refined petroleum products will now be constituting the bulk of that. But it just tells you how crucial Dangote is to the economy of Nigeria. Everything and anything he does not only affects the market, but it also affects the economic situation of the country.
Certainly. And looking at Mozambique and their gold production, that did fall by 17% in 2025. Not really good news for them.
This is a story of small-scale and artisanal mining, Thami, because we spoke a few weeks ago, maybe we didn't, about Ghana, that of the 6 million ounces of gold they exported last year, more than 3 million came from small and artisanal mining. So whenever you disturb that part of the industry, and they miss their targets. So the Manica province missed their targets, and as a result of that, the country only achieved 82% of its usual target. So the volume of 1.349 tons is closer to where they were in 2022. And although they are aiming that this year they will produce 1.7 thousand tons, they have to increase the participation of the small and medium mining, which will be the bulk of what is happening in that province that had shut down, because the central government had banned mining because they thought they were mining in an irresponsible manner. They were not able to account for some of the pollution that happens, some of the environmental degradation. But they suspended the license, and the government is saying we will resume this year. The spokesperson of the department, Inocencio Impisa, saying they will resume, and that's why they are hoping that they will reach 1.7 again this year.
All right. So really this is a logistical issue, not so much an issue of reserves or anything else for Mozambique. And looking at Cobalt, they are a company linked to Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates. Talk to us about their plans on, digitizing Burundi's geological data.
Yes, when you want to mine in any country, the first thing you want is geological data. People will call it geophysicals. In other words, where are the reserves? Who is mining where? Now, the metals people are looking for now are lithium, cobalt, a bit of copper here and there. They want manganese, they want coltan, they want tin. Why? Because of the batteries, renewable batteries, because of the ICT revolution. There are so many tablets, so many cell phones. These are the minerals that go into these devices. And that's why you see Bill Gates in it. Bill Gates because of his Microsoft link, Jeff Bezos because of his Amazon, because all those two companies depend on the internet, and the internet depends on devices, and devices depend on these minerals. That's why President Trump was involved in the DRC conflict with Rwanda, but the cobalt company is already involved in the DRC, in Zambia as well, and this time they have moved into Burundi. Most countries like Burundi will not have geophysical maps, or if they have, they'll be too old, maybe 30 or 40 years old. And as you know, when people mine, you need to update them, and that's why cobalt and life zone metals are coming in to say, let's first of all digitalize. They say they will make it available to the public, the information, but already it will be owned by them, Thami.
And moving on to Botswana, we see increased relations between Botswana and Angola, with President Duma Boko making his way to Angola on an official visit.
Yes, and after that he will go to Namibia. Now you'll say, what do Namibia, Botswana, and Angola have in common? It's diamonds. In diamonds, you have Namdeb in Namibia, you have Debswana in Botswana, which are joint ventures between De Beers and Botswana and Namibia respectively. And Angola, on the other hand, is interested in buying a stake in De Beers. SDBS wants to get out of diamond mining because of the challenge that's posed by lab-made diamonds. And that's why you see these three countries visiting one another. They are discussing minerals, they are discussing energy collaboration.
And also looking at Equity Group records historic results. They reported, quite a 55% growth in profit after tax. Not too bad.
That's average. If you break it down, it's a Kenya-based bank headed by the former World Entrepreneur of the Year, EY Entrepreneur of the Year, James Mwangi. In the DRC, that profit after tax went up not 55% but 58%. In Tanzania, it went up 125%. In Uganda, it went up by 500%. So, and the dividends, which is what shareholders look for, went up by 35.3%. So it's a very successful business. And they are saying, Thami, 98% of their transactions are happening outside of branches. This is the company that took advantage of the fintech revolution, and they made it a point that they connect the success of their bank, which was more like collective savings, stokvel, as we say in South Africa, or collective savings scheme, and they made sure that they get the fintech into it. And as a result, non-performing loans coverage has gone up, which means the loans that don't perform won't endanger the company. Loan loss provision is also down, which means they are managing their borrowing much better. The cost-to-income ratio is now at 51%, which is very good for a bank. It's down from 58%. So every indicator in this bank is pointing in the right direction.
Victor Khomuswana, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking us through some of the leading business stories on the African continent.
It's been a pleasure, Thami.
Have a great one. Thank you. That's Victor Khomuswana, is author of Africa is Open for Business and Africa Bounces Back. He'll be with us once again, same time, same place, next week.
As Africa renews, so does its voices. 60 years of Channel Africa.
Darubini ya Afrika na I am Henry Shakif.
Inaelezwa kwamba serikali kule visiwani Zanzibar imetangaza mpango mkubwa wa kuweza kurejesha urithi unaoungwa mkono na uwekezaji wa sekta ya umma na binafsi yenye thamani ya dola milioni 12. Unadhani sasa Zanzibar imeamua kujipambanua yenyewe kama yenyewe?
Hizi ni habari njema. Hizi ni habari njema kwanza katika kuongeza uwekezaji kwenye sekta ya utalii, ngoni mwa sekta mama kwa serikali ya mapinduzi ya Zanzibar.
Pengine unawaambia nini Watanzania walioko nje ya Tanzania na walioko ndani kuweza kuzitizama fursa hizi kwa jicho la pili na kuweza kuwekeza ndani?
Jambo hili lina mtazamo mpana. Cha kwanza ni aina ya maisha ambayo baadhi ya watu visiwani Zanzibar wamekuwa nayo, na hii ni kutokana na ile colonial legacy, ile kutawaliwa na wenzetu wametawaliwa na masultani.
Darubini ya Afrika kila Jumatatu hadi Ijumaa kuanzia saa 11 kamili hadi saa 12 kamili jioni majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
It is 22 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time as we focus on South African farmers. They're facing growing pressure as global fertilizer prices climb amid escalating tensions in the Middle East. This does raise concerns about higher production costs, the potential impacts on crop yields, as well as the rising food prices. Wandile Sihlobo is Presidential Envoy on Agriculture and Land and Chief Economist at the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa, AgBiz, says the country currently has no immediate fertilizer supply constraints. However, he does warn that prices are increasing due to fears of global supply disruptions. He joins us now on the line. Wandile Sihlobo, good to be talking to you once again. Welcome.
Thanks for having me on.
So, Wandile, how directly are Middle East tensions influencing the global fertilizer prices? And at what point could rising fertilizer prices actually begin to threaten South Africa's food security?
I think the first thing to state is that we do not foresee risks to our food security over the foreseeable future. We are solid on food supplies, but also on the pricing side, we don't anticipate notable increases in food prices. If anything, we actually still of the view that food price inflation in South Africa will moderate this year. There may be temporary blips that are caused largely by the fuel price increases that you may see showing up in April, May. But I think for much of the year, you may see food prices moderating fairly well. The reason I say that is because we are coming from some of the favorable agricultural seasons where we have planted and we have ample grain, fruits, vegetable supplies. So we are not seeing a risk on that. But there are, of course, worries of the higher input costs that are starting to plant from end of April to May. And that will be our winter crops, mainly wheat, barley, canola, and oats.
And on that very point, in that area of concern, which is, as you've mentioned, the higher fertilizer costs, how might South African farmers adjust their planting strategies in response to this?
We generally encourage that farmers maximize their plantings as they typically do. And the other challenge, possibility is also the fact that there may be a notable number of farmers that have already purchased their fertilizer as they knew that they would be planting already from the end of April. But for some that didn't purchase their fertilizer, of course, the prices are higher. The prices are higher not because of supply constraints in South Africa, but because fertilizer is a global traded commodity. So given the Middle East and the fact that in the Strait of Hormuz, we have roughly about a third of nitrogen that actually passes there, which is a key ingredient to fertilizer, we began to see that there are upside price pressures on fertilizer globally, not just in South Africa. So our sense then is that we will see when the early planting intentions data comes out in around about end of April, and we'll get a sense of what the farmers are thinking. But at this point, we don't get an indication of a reduction in area planting. But of course, on terms of the profitability, some farmers in those areas, they will be squeezed. But I think when you take a long view now, not only of South Africa, but the greater Southern Africa, and say, going forward, how do we anticipate all of this impacting for much of Southern Africa and indeed the greater African continent? I think we can only be able to get a view from around mid-year, June or so. And that all will be dependent as to how long the war continues and what are the events turning out to be like.
And finally, Wandile, is there a delay between fertilizer price increases and the retail food inflation?
There's actually very no direct impact because the farmers, I mean, as much as this may seem simplistic to someone listening to our conversation, and it's not an intention to minimize the issue, but farmers are price takers in a sense that they don't get to make the prices. It's really made in a global supply aspect. And this can disadvantage farmers then because it does mean that regardless of how much input cost you have incurred, you have very limited control of how you can recoup those costs because you can't suddenly increase your own prices. You are following what the world market is pretty much giving you in major commodities in agriculture. And then that tells us then in a sense that if you are sitting as a consumer, as long as planting continue in a general way, you are not at a risk that because fertilizer prices are higher, somehow our food prices will increase. The only danger comes when farmers begin to adjust the area planting to smaller. But again, the blessing of the moment, if one can use such a word, is that all of these disruption is happening at a time where we are not in season. And for the entire African continent, sub-Saharan Africa continent, our planting in general starts from around about October for our staple grain in Southern Africa. And of course, the likes of Kenya and the others start slightly late from November, which is why I'm making the reference that from mid-year, this is where things will be important, and that will be a determinant for the crop that we are harvesting in 2027. But for the near term, really the war on food prices is related to fuel, because fuel forms a bigger component, not only in South Africa and across the entire region of the transportation of course, but in South African perspective, because of our abundance of agricultural products, we don't foresee near-term pressures that are extreme to consumers. But for farmers, we do see reduced profitability because of some of these higher, but we think agricultural activity will continue in a normal way.
Wandile Sihlobo, thank you very much for that update as far as the agriculture sector is concerned and its impact, or rather the impact of the Middle East war on that. That's Wandile Sihlobo, South Africa's presidential envoy on agriculture and land, and is also chief economist of the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa, otherwise known as AgBiz.
Clear your diaries for the 25th of March, 2026. Channel Africa, in partnership with Wits Business School, invites you to a climate change conversation that goes beyond talk. 3 powerful panel discussions. 1 stage. Big questions, bold answers. If you care about the future and value honest, intelligent discussions, this is your seat at the table. Join us on March 25 for Africa Matters. Climate change, financing Africa's recovery. Only on Channel Africa.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 4:30 p.m. Central African time. Let's head over now to the markets desk, where Buntle Hedbush is standing by with your latest market indicators.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet. Channel 628. Business News on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Thami. Good afternoon. And our final look at the indicators this afternoon. $1 is trading at 16 Rand 88 in South Africa. In Botswana, it's trading at 13.50. Namibia, 16 Namibian dollars 88. And the Zambian kwacha is trading at 19 kwacha 56. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shillings 70. Ethiopia, 156 birr 76. Uganda, 3,755 shilling, and in Tanzania, it's at 2,596 shilling. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,359 naira. In Egypt, the dollar is trading at 52 Egyptian pound 21. Tunisia, 2 dinar 92. In Algeria, it's at 131 dinar 48. And in Morocco, the dollar will cost you 9 dirham 30. In Angola, the dollar is trading at 912 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is trading at 2,253 to the US dollar. Looking at commodities this afternoon, gold is trading at $4,661 per ounce, platinum at $1,973 per ounce, while Brent crude oil is at $108.27 a barrel. And that's your indicators this afternoon. If you have any business stories you'd like to share with us, please do send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Give us a call on +2711 714 4459. For the Channel Africa Business Desk, I am Buntle Hedbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And for the latest from the business of sport, here's Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you so much, Thami. A very good afternoon indeed from the sports desk. Well, the general manager of the Southern Guards GC team, Richard Glover, says the number one objective when the team rebranded was to bring a live event to South Africa. So Glover was appointed by Live in 2024 as one of the 5U team general managers. Now speaking exclusively to SABC Sport at Steyn City in Johannesburg, Glover says it's a proud moment to finally see a vision realized.
Yeah, so I joined Live Golf at the end of 2024 to take on the All South African team, which was used to be called Stinger and now has been rebranded to the Southern Guards GC. And I think our number one objective was to bring a live event to South Africa. I think we realized that as a team that if we were to be successful and really turn this into a business and a brand, we needed a South African event. And it's a very proud moment to actually be standing here and speaking to you about this, because, I mean, if you see behind me, you see some of the crowds, you see the gees, and you see there's like the national pride that's just like vibing from this place. It's like a really proud moment.
The former Tennis South Africa CEO says since the team's rebrand, they now represent South Africa.
the team represents South Africa. So these are 4 boys from different parts of South Africa who've come from the southern tip of Africa and are competing on the global world stage. I think if you look at their collars closely, the back of the collars, they actually play with the Rainbow Nation flag. And that's because they feel like they are representing the country and are representing the country on the Global Live Golf Tour. So we are a team of proudly South African men and women.
Well, South Africa's Tourism Minister Patricia de Lille says high-value visitors linked to major sporting events typically stay longer and spend more money extending their impact into accommodation, transport, food services, as well as local suppliers. She was speaking as the country welcomes over 90,000 people for the ongoing Live Golf Tournament in Johannesburg in the Gauteng province. Now, in Gauteng, the provincial government is aligning the tournament with the growing Gauteng Together 2030 blueprint, with the Gauteng Tourism Authority identifying golf tourism as a high-value segment. Now, small as well as medium enterprises have been encouraged to design golf tourism packages combining Live Golf tickets with township tours, safari experiences, as well as luxury stays, with the provincial government also prioritizing black women as well as youth-owned operators in related services procurement. The tournament will conclude on Sunday. Now, the Asian Football Confederation have announced its decision to discontinue the ongoing bidding process for the AFC Asian Cup in 2031 as well as the edition in 2035. So this follows recent engagement with FIFA concerning a potential revision of the international match calendar, which includes a proposal to stage future editions of the AFC Asian Cup in even-numbered years. In principle, the AFC has taken note of this direction and will work now towards aligning its competitions accordingly. So given the far-reaching implications such as the change that would have on the scheduling as well as strategic planning of its premier national team competition, the AFC have initiated a broader review of its competitions calendar. And finally, Manchester City striker Erling Haaland has been announced as an investor in a new global chess tour. The 25-year-old is backing the Norway Chess Organization, which is set to launch the Total Chess World Championship Tour next year. 4 tournaments will be staged annually in different cities, with the world champion crowned across 3 disciplines: the Fast Classic, the Rapid, as well as the Blitz Chess. It is also being supported by the International Chess Federation, and a pilot tournament is planned for this year. So each season will have a minimum prize pool of $2.7 million, with the organization also describing it as one of the most significant development in modern chess. 16:36 p.m. Central African Time. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or call us on +27 11714 4459. Have a great sporting weekend. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Stay tuned to Channel Africa. Stream us on our new and updated website, channelafrica.co.za. Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
It is exactly 4:37 Central African Time as we turn our focus now to the Ethiopian, or the former Ethiopian president, Sahle-Work Zewde. He says when a government begins, or rather says that when a government begins to systematically restrict the rights of women and girls, it becomes the blueprint of a system which is more authoritarian. She was speaking at the Forbes Leading Women Summit 2026, which is taking place in Johannesburg, South Africa. The summit convened influential leaders from across the African continent as well as the globe to explore leadership, entrepreneurship, investment, as well as innovation, while celebrating the women shaping the continent's future. Channel Africa's Nhlanhla Mahlangu was there and filed this report.
Africa's most prominent female pioneers, innovators, leaders, and luminaries gathered for the 2026 Forbes Women Africa Leading Women Summit in Johannesburg to celebrate the significant strides made by women across the continent and address the barriers still impeding true gender equality. Hosted by Forbes Africa, the summit brought together influential leaders, entrepreneurs, policymakers, and change makers from across the continent. This year's theme, The Voice, Vision and Victories of Her Africa, focused on amplifying women's voices while recognizing measurable leadership outcomes across industries. Delivering the keynote address, former Ethiopian President Saleh Work-Zewde said an attack on women's rights is an attack on democracy.
It is a test. If they can silence and control half of the population, that is not really a safe place. In the face of this daunting reality, then what is our role? What can a room full of leading women do when the tides of history seems to be turning? My answer is this: we must be more than leaders in our fields. We must be the guardians of the future. And that starts with seeing ourselves and each other not as beneficiary of progress, but as its fierce protectors and relentless drivers. You've been called role models, and yes, that is the title I accept myself with humility. But being a role model is not about being perfect and unattainable. It's about being visible. It's about showing the next generation of African girls, the girl in Addis Ababa, the girl in Johannesburg, in Dakar, or in Tunis, that their dreams are valid, that a seat at a table is not an afterthought, a voice in a conversation, a place in the parliament is her birthright.
Speaking through an interpreter in a wide-ranging interview, Prime Minister in the DRC, Judith Sumiwa Duluka, says it's crucial for the leaders of the continent to give women and the youth a chance in leadership.
The importance of looking for leaders who push our youth to the forefront, who are innovative, who have perhaps a disciplined way of pursuing or turning our natural resources commercially viable entities for the betterment of our citizens across the continent, and leadership who give the youth a chance.
In addition to performances from renowned African poets and artists, the summit tackled a range of critical topics through insightful panel discussions with the precise aim of sharing and sparking new ideas to advance women's progress. These included reflecting on the role of women in driving positive change in society and business, especially against a context of inequality, crisis and conflict, how female executives can uplift the next generation of female leaders, how women are challenging the status quo in sports and arts, and how artificial intelligence can impact the workforce of the future. Gambia's Farmer Jalo from HSC Space, a space company that uses space data for climate, says the summit served as a powerful way to see women coming together to share stories.
I think it enables you to be able to see yourself in other people's story, but also to see possibility. As for example, for me as a young woman growing up here in Africa, I have heard different stories and lucky enough to meet other amazing women that are part of the spotlight, but also to see beauty in their stories, to see the differences, but also to see the same things that we have in common, and that itself is very beautiful.
Melissa Naimuli was one of the panelists who represented the entertainment industry.
It was absolutely incredible, so inspirational, and I think it's very rare to see so many women gather in such spaces where we talk about reshaping industries, where we're leaders of industries from arts to culture to business. Truly an inspiring day. I would do it again.
The event ended with an awards ceremony honoring women who continue to shape the African continent. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Dlandla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
So let's continue our focus then on the 11th annual Forbes Women Africa Leading Women Summit. And joining us for this conversation is the managing editor of Forbes and Forbes Women Africa, Renika Nethel. A very good afternoon to you, Renika. Good to be chatting with you. You must be exhausted after, such a huge event once again.
Thank you, Thami. Thank you for having me on the show. It's good exhaustion, because we've been working relentlessly towards this for the last few weeks, the entire team of the Africa Business News Group. It's a very proud moment for all of us, and it's also a very emotional a moment for us, because consistently doing this for 11 years must mean that we are doing something right, and being able to consistently bring together role models in a room together, and from different parts of the world, when people actually endeavor to come together and share their experiences and create opportunities for the next generation. I think it's an incredible feeling. There's a great sense of accomplishment. And I remember when we started 11 years ago, it was 10 tables in a room and 100 women in a room, and now we were oversubscribed for the event. So we've almost 1,500 people in the room and beyond watching on social media.
Absolutely
so it's an
amazing.
incredible feeling of achievement, being able to convene people of influence and impact together in a room and sharing and collaborating and creating more opportunities. It is what is to come out of this that is more important than what has happened.
Certainly. And I mean, you speak about the satisfaction of having done it and having done it well for the 11th time. But I'm sure alongside that sense of satisfaction is also the added pressure of what you're going to do differently, how you're going to up your game, if that is at all possible. So in your view, how has this particular year's summit evolved over the years? What did you do differently this year?
So every year we come up with a new theme, and it's always a theme that speaks to the environment of today. It speaks to the leadership, the executive leadership that we have on the continent today. So this year too, we aligned with the theme, and it was the voice, vision, and victories of her Africa. So we really personalized Africa and the female gender here, if you see, because it is about, we always talk about the future of Africa being a young Africa, but it's also a female Africa. It is the world's, the population. I mean, it is the continent with the world's youngest population, and most of it is female. And you can pick this up from the statistics, the studies, the fact that the more women you have in countries or in economies, the better the economy does. And this is a proven fact. If you suppress women, the economy or the country does not do well. Look at any study. And so it's one half of the population. And we're talking about that one half of the population that is actually meritoriously contributing to the economy in every way, contributing to business, sports. So this is why this conference convenes together women from all walks of life, from practically every sector in society. If you just now spoke about Fama Jallow, I mean, she's in the space sector, right? So we bring together women from unheard of sectors, the unsung heroines, so to speak, from countries that are as small as the Gambia. So from everyone, it's not just the bigger economies of Africa that we focus on. If you look at the summit, we had people flying in from across Africa, and that's how we choose the speakers. It's always a stellar collection of speakers from across Africa representing different sectors and women who've not been written about before. And they come forward and then they speak about the failures that they've had and the great successes that they've had.
Right.
And that really inspires the young people. And for me, measurable action is somebody coming up to me and saying that I attended the summit 10 years ago. And in 10 years, I've grown my business because of the lessons I heard and because of I was very inspired. I had a young woman come up to me saying, I wrote a book because I was inspired by the summit. There was another person who said, I started a company and I became a lawyer because of the stories I heard, and I was very inspired at the summit. So I think we've come to a stage in 11 years where we're definitely beginning to see that change. And I would like to believe that we're a pioneer in that respect, because we started these conversations and here we are. And as I said in my speech yesterday, this is Africa's biggest and most powerful editorial-led women's summit. Everything you see at the summit is what we do in the magazine and for the brand. It's a 4D interpretation, interpretation of everything you see on our website and what we stand for as a brand, which is advancing these conversations on gender and on every and how there are these are not just mere contributions, these are definitive examples in the flesh that you see before you at the summit.
And I think this is a conversation really for another day, and I'd love to pick this up with you, Renika, at some point, about the business of magazines and how you've managed to actually survive in an extremely challenging environment where, publications are shutting down because of the digital revolution. But that's something for another day. What I want to talk about now is you mentioned the fact that you've got guests and women coming from different countries, different socio-economic groups and different environments and different policies in those countries. What were some of the key themes and perhaps even the solutions that came out of discussions around topics such as diversity, equity and inclusion? Because these seem to be quite universal around the country as it pertains to women.
Yes, definitely. So, which is why, at our summit every year, it's not just titans of business, or we always have Olympian athletes, we have sports stars, we have Grammy-winning artists. But if you see, we also have policy makers at summit. This year, we had, the first female prime minister of the DRC. She was also on the Forbes global list of most powerful women in the world. We had the former Ethiopian president attend. She was the first female president for Ethiopia. And all of them had a common narrative, of how they're affecting these kind of changes in their own countries. And the dialogue of inclusion, diversity, it just continues. It's an ongoing conversation that needs to attain critical mass. And you can see it at these conventions and these conferences. For example, you asked about some of the themes that we had. We always have topics of the day. So there's always panels on AI and fintech and climate change and this, the C-suite leadership. But this year, if you see, we included a specific panel on inclusivity in business and, how we can actually bring together societies, mainstream societies that have felt excluded in the past. For example, the caregivers, they're always underrated. And most of the time, when you speak to women, you successful women especially, they'll speak about how support systems are very important. For example, women in their 30s and 40s who are also navigating personal trials where they have children to look after, they have older parents to look after. So what is the support system? Most of us are able to do what we do because of the support systems that we have back home. But how much of that is actually celebrated? We rarely celebrate the female caregivers in our society or the nurses who look after our parents and look after us when we need them. So that was the one panel that really stood out for me.
We're going to have to unfortunately leave it at that for this afternoon, Renika, but I'm really impressed by the diversity of your topics.
Yes.
And just looking at leadership, because it does, display itself in different contexts. You don't have to be in a boardroom to be a leader. The very caregiver is leader and pretty much, CEO of your house when you're not there.
Yes.
So Renika Methil, thank you so much. Lovely chatting to you and really looking forward to what you've got in store for us for the 12th edition next year. Have a good one.
And thank you for having these shows where you talk about these conversations. Thank you so much, Thami.
Really important. Thank you, Renika. That's Renika Methil, Managing Editor of Forbes and Forbes Women Africa.
Franschhoek, get ready. The vibe is happening this March. The Monroe Jazz Festival Franschhoek is bringing more than 30 local and international acts for one unforgettable weekend, including DJ Zinke, DJ Kent, DJ Kent Zero, Layla Hathaway, Robert Glasper, and Bilal, plus many more. From 27 to 29 March 2026, experience the music, the culture, and the energy. Grab your tickets now at ticketmaster.co.za. Monroe Jazz Festival Franschhoek. Feel the energy. Live the moment.
For 60 years, Channel Africa has connected the continent. Celebrate the journey. Celebrate the African perspective.
And we continue giving you more of the African perspective in about, 8 minutes time. We'll be shifting gears from the English language stations to the Francophone. And we've got Madame Joël standing by just to give you a sneak peek of what they've got in store for us on Vue d'Afrique.
Bonjour à tous les éditeurs de Channel Africa sur Vue d'Afrique. Dans quelques petites minutes, il sera question de la Confédération des États du Sahel qui exprime sa vive indignation à la suite de l'adoption par le Parlement européen d'une résolution exigeant la libération de Mohamed Bazoum. Nous parlerons également de la peine de prison à perpétuité contre certains leaders séparatistes anglophones au Cameroun qui a été annulée, la peine à perpétuité, oui, qui a été annulée ou qui tient toujours. On verra les détails dans notre grande actualité. Et en deuxième partie, c'est le sport avec Jolino Songo. Merci de rester connecté. Merci Thami.
Merci beaucoup, Joel. Coming up at the top of the hour.
African enterprise meets global opportunity. Africa in business on Channel Africa.
So let's close off this afternoon by taking a look at Africa's markets. They are navigating a period of heightened uncertainty. This, as you know, as global economics shifts and geopolitical tensions continue to intensify, and also the fluctuating commodity prices do continue to shape the continent's outlook. From currency pressures to capital flows, policymakers and investors are being forced to adapt very quickly in a rapidly changing environment. But amid the volatility, questions remain about resilience, opportunity, and Africa's position in the global economy. Joining us this afternoon is Henry Gilfillan, Director for Africa International Advisors. Good to have you with us, Henry. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Hi, Thami, and glad to be with you, and good afternoon to your listeners.
So, Henry, what are the key global forces that are currently driving volatility in the African markets? I did actually mention a few of them, but you may have a few more to add.
Yeah, thanks. I think, we've seen even before the recent developments the last couple of weeks in the Middle East, trade globally has become a lot more politicized than it has been for a very long time, and that already was creating some quite significant potential disruptions in African markets. We've seen significant tariffs being imposed on countries like Lesotho all of a sudden being hit with 50-60% tariffs with the US. So we've seen that, and then obviously the developments in the last few weeks have created huge shocks across not just energy markets, but if you look at things like fertilizers and some really important minerals and inputs into the industrial economy. So I think all of these things are impacting and really changing the environment for Africa.
And how then are policymakers responding in order to try to stabilize the economies and also in the same breath protecting growth?
Sure. I mean, I think it's really focus on what can we control, within our own control. So if you look at, for instance, a country like South Africa, we've seen very good progress in improving macroeconomic stability with a lowering of the inflation target, for instance, last year. Very responsible fiscal policy being adopted, which I think South Africa is probably better positioned than many developed markets at the moment in terms of its fiscal outlook. And you've had similar developments in countries like Ethiopia, Nigeria, with improved macroeconomic but also microeconomic policies. So I think there's been a real focus on fixing what we can internally, and then also driving greater regional integration through the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So I think those are important developments which hopefully will cushion Africa to an extent from the forces globally.
And it is quite true that there are always opportunities that exist even in the darkest and most volatile of markets. And with that in mind, what would you highlight as perhaps the most resilient investment opportunities that are emerging across the continent?
Sure. I think firstly, let's look at where can Africa compete in areas which are now being disrupted, and particularly let's start with energy, right? We've seen significant destruction of liquid natural gas infrastructure in the Middle East, and then you start looking at where can Africa position itself in that regard. And we have obviously countries like Nigeria, Angola, Equatorial Guinea as existing suppliers of LNG, but we're starting to see Mozambique, hopefully by the end of this decade, becoming a very substantial LNG player. So that, and then there's Namibia that's coming up. South Africa has got oil and gas potential. So I think in that energy sector, there's real opportunity. But then I think there's also opportunity to look at areas where you wouldn't traditionally think about Africa competing. So if you think about the Middle East having been a transit hub for air travel, and some of the great work that airlines like Kenya Airways and Ethiopian have done to establish places like Nairobi and Addis Ababa as transit hubs. I think there's some real opportunity arising there, and there may well be other parts of Africa that can do something similar. So I think it's really time for Africa to think about those opportunities in a very different way.
Henry Gilfillan, thank you so much for taking us through that. Certainly a different look, as he says, a different perspective on these various investment opportunities that are emerging, even in the midst of the global instability. Henry Gilfillan, Director, Africa International Advisors, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And that's how we come to the end of Africa in Business for today. Wow, how quickly time has flown, hasn't it? Wishing you a splendid weekend ahead, but do stay tuned to Channel Africa as Vue d'Afrique comes up from myself, Thami Ngubeni, and the entire Africa in Business team. Have yourself a restful weekend and restez connectés for Vue d'Afrique.
Broadcasting in 5 different languages, connecting the continent. This is Channel Africa.